If you know that horn line, you already know what tune we're talking about today. We are digging into the classic 1978 R&B hit by Bobby Caldwell, What You Won't Do for Love. Now, we usually talk about swinging straight ahead jazz things on this channel. Today, we're going to dig into this R&B classic, figure out why the chord progression in this tune is so key to our growth as improvisers. What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in today. As always, today we're digging into Bobby Caldwell. I love this tune. It is a total classic. Even though I talk mostly about jazz here on the channel, I've spent a ton of my career playing in cover bands, playing in R&B bands, playing in funk bands. I've probably played this tune more than I've played a ton of jazz standards over the years because it's just a tune that a lot of people play. So let's get into things. The one caveat I will give you before we jump in here is that the original tune is kind of pitched between two key centers. It either sits in F sharp minor or F minor. This is probably the result of sort of a tape speed error when it was recorded. The pitch got shifted a little bit. When I actually tend to find this played in sort of the real world, I think most people play it in F sharp minor. However, today we're going to talk in F minor. That is purely because that is going to be a little easier key for everyone to kind of understand these concepts. You, by all means, should learn it in F sharp minor because that's really where people play it. But I find that most people are probably a little more comfortable in F minor, especially most trombone players. So that's where we're going to talk today. Don't at me in the comments, hey, it should be in F sharp or anything like that. I'm fully aware, but I want to talk in a key that is going to be the most confident for everybody to grasp some of these concepts. So if you're not aware of this tune, it sounds like this. What we're interested in is the chord progression and how this chord progression can help us improve as improvisers. It's a really simple chord progression. You'll find it in actually a lot of different tunes, R&B tunes, jazz tunes, all this sort of stuff. So what we have going on here, just to understand a bit of quick analysis that will help us through today's lesson, is we have four chords. We have a D flat major 7 chord, C7 that usually has some alterations on it, F minor 7, and B flat dominant 7. So we're in the key of F minor. That F minor is actually the 1 chord in this case. So we have a progression that is flat 6 to 5, resolving to 1, and then going to 4. Now there are some other like little twists and turns you could think about the harmony here. We're not going to get super deep into that angle because that's not really going to be the main thrust of how we take this tune apart. The first thing that's going to serve you well in this tune is just being able to play minor pentatonic all day, create nice melodies in that vein. This is a pretty forgiving chord progression. You do maybe have to be just a little cautious about what chord tones you hit on that C7 chord, but other than that, minor pentatonic can serve you really well here. That's not really what we're going to dig into today. We are going to dig in how we actually move through these changes in a more horizontal fashion and really talk about why this chord progression is so great for working on your ability to use voice leading to build your lines. When we talk about voice leading, we're talking about how each of the chord tones from one chord moves to chord tones in the next chord. Any chord progression is going to have sort of voice leading things going on. It's just super clear in this tune, and that's why this is a great tune for us as improvisers to practice. So let's break this down a little bit. We want to know the arpeggios here. We're not going to play that today. These are relatively straightforward arpeggios. The 5 chord in this tune is usually some sort of altered 5 chord. To make things a little simpler to see how the voice leading works, I'm going to make it just a straight up C7 chord. All the concepts would still be true when you go to some alterations. We'll talk about that in the back half of this lesson. But we're going to start by just having it be straight up C7. So our first chord, D flat major 7. I'm just going to choose one of the chord tones to start on. In this case, I'm going to choose the F. That's the tonic of the whole song. We're in F minor, so I'm going to start there. What I want to think about is when I go from D flat to C, what are my other chord tone options? I've got a C, an E, a G, and a B flat. Which ones are close to the F? And so in our case, it's going to be an E or a G. So I just choose one of those notes, choose which path I want to go, and then I do that on the next chord and the next chord. So if I'm on the C7 chord, let's say I chose an E for the C7 chord. Now I'm going to F minor 7. Again, I think about my chord tones. My closest chord tones to the E chord would be an E flat or up to an F. I'm going to choose the E flat in this case. Then I do the same thing going to B flat. My closest chord tones would be either going down to a D natural or up to an F. In this case, I'm going to go down to a D natural. That is going to create a really simple musical idea. going from an F to an E natural to an E flat to a D. In this case, just going down by half steps. Let's hear what that would sound like with a very simple, just chordal accompaniment, so you can see how those chord tones fit against the harmony. Now, you could do this starting on any chord tone. It's going to take you a different path through the chords. If you want to see some examples, make sure to check out the handout for this week. I have a bunch of different sort of voice leading pathways. It's kind of like what I refer to them as on that as an example, and you can move them through the harmony in different ways. Now, this is not going to get you very far if you just play half notes like I did in that example. That's probably not going to be very satisfying. So once you have a good idea about what's happening from a theory standpoint, you got to start to move this into some more musical settings. You're going to add some rhythms, really thinking about, in our case, why we're doing it in an exercise fashion, connecting with the rhythm section. You know, this tune kind of has like a little groove to it, so you want to make sure you're changing chords at the right time. Maybe you think about adding some other chord tones to kind of help elaborate on this basic melody while keeping the outline, the basic shape of the voice leading pathway. Let's just hear a couple examples. We're going to play it through 4 times, the chord progression. The first 2 times, I'm just going to use rhythm. I'm going to use that at the F to E flat to D, the example we just did. And the second 2 times, I'm going to add just other chord tones to the example and see what we can do to kind of make it feel a little more musical. As usual in that second half, I highlighted my voice leading pathway with red. So you could see how, even though I had some other stuff going on, I kept going to that very specified outline that I had. And this is how I would practice this stuff. This works great on a simple chord progression. You could do this on any tune, but this tune is so great because it's so clear and so simple. You can really dig your teeth into this concept. Now, I mentioned alterations. Usually the 5 chord here, the C chord, is an altered chord. It has a flat 9, flat 13, all that sort of stuff. So instead of thinking that's going to specifically make it more dissonant, it will add a little bit of tension. I would actually just think it creates different pathways that you might choose. Let's just look at a couple of examples here. So what if we go back to our D flat chord and I still start on my F? So when I go to that C chord, I'm going to think this is a C chord with flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13 now. So I got to think, what are my new notes that are available? I could possibly go up to the sharp 11, or in my case, I'm going to go down to the sharp 9, the E flat. Now, if you know about that sort of sound, sharp 9s really like to go sharp 9, flat 9, and then eventually resolve to the 5th of the next chord. And that's going to be the pathway I'm going to choose. So my notes are not going to be an F, E flat, D flat, C, B flat to move through this section. There's going to be a momentary little crunch, a little bit of tension on the dominant chord, but that's going to resolve smoothly to the 1 chord. This way of thinking horizontally can really help us connect with how some of the alterations kind of like to work. You certainly don't have to go sharp 9, flat 9 to the 5th. There are other things you can do, but that's probably the most common kind of horizontal or melodic way of using that extension. And rather just thinking like, oh, I've got to play a sharp 9 because that's like the hip note to play, instead, you can move through those notes to really kind of create some nice melodies. So to round this out and kind of pull everything together, let's look at a more fully fleshed out example. I'm going to play through the first 16 bars of the etude that is available for those of you who join me over on Patreon this week. It has this entire exercise sort of like fully fleshed out through the first 16 bars, or sort of like 16 bars of these changes. And what I did, and what you'll see on the screen here is in a second, is I did kind of 2 repetitions through the changes, starting on the root for the first chord. So on the D flat chord, I start on the D flat and make my choices based on that. Second 4 bars, I start on the 3rd, make my choices based on that. Next 4 bars start on the 5th, and then the next 4 bars start on the 7th. So this is just going to give me different ways of thinking about moving through these changes. Now, I still did it a little bit more as an exercise, where I'm thinking a little more about rhythm and maybe mostly using chord tones to help guide my other note choices. When you actually take this all the way to like just actual improvisation. This is going to inform your ear and inform your choices, but hopefully will not limit you too much, but it can give you some really nice effects. So let's just check out what that would sound like. Again, I highlighted all of my chord tones, or all my voice leading pathways, I should say, in red, and I also included the voice leading pathway underneath, so you can kind of follow along and see how I connected some of these dots. They don't always resolve on the downbeat. Sometimes they maybe resolve a little bit later in the measure, but that is sort of what my ear is listening for. All right, we're here at the end of today's lesson. If you made it this far and you know another tune, super common R&B tune from the 70s that uses basically this exact same chord progression, you hit it in the comments, you will have my undying respect. I love this era of music. In some ways, I almost enjoy playing this stuff as much. I don't know if I'd say more than straight ahead swinging things, but I really love playing this sort of stuff. And even though this chord progression is very simple, I think we have a lot to learn from it, and it's definitely very fun to improvise over. So give it a try, practice it. Maybe try to trot this tune out sometime if you can. Remember, it's usually an F sharp, so check it out there as well. Other than that, we'll see you in the woodshed.